here we go. Record is begun. It says recording. Danny, it's all yours.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey, can you guys hear our washing machine?
I can't.
No.
Okay. Okay, good. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure.
Well, is it working all right?
Yeah, but it makes a lot of noise, so.
Well, just mute yourself unless you're talking.
Okay.
I'll mute you. You unmute if you want to say something. Go ahead, Danny.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. It's good to be with you. My understanding, correct, Ron, we will not be together next week with Thanksgiving happening, right?
Correct.
And so, and we missed recording our last session. And so what we're going to do tonight, and when Ron saw this worksheet, he said, doesn't seem like we're progressing very well or very far. And I said, well, let's go back. Trust me, let's deal with this section one more time in a slightly different way. If you're one of the kind of folks that likes to write things down, I would encourage you to make some notes so that we can refer to those kind of things as we continue on in our study once we get started again after Thanksgiving. Now, tonight, our title, Ron, what's our title? Why don't we go ahead and put the worksheet up? I think it can just stay up unless people have it. I think they can look at it.
Well, I think a lot of people have it, but I'll put it up and I'll bring it down periodically.
Okay, so the title of the worksheet, or the title of tonight's lesson is what? Is
Divine Debate. This is Habakkuk number 6, class number 6.
And this is really sort of Habakkuk 5b is really what it is. And is everybody muted?
I don't know.
Okay, well,
I can
let's
check.
go ahead and ask this question. We're calling this divine debate. Anybody have any idea why we would call a lesson in Habakkuk divine debate?
Is God there, or is he not? Is he listening? Is he not?
Okay. There is always the debate about that, right?
Right.
I think if it's a divine debate, at least one of the debaters is divine.
Right.
And it's wonderful to see Jen and Lisa. Sorry.
Hi,
for my
y'all.
little ADD there, but that's our COVID patients who have recovered.
Oh, wonderful.
Yay!
Good to have you very much.
Like a recovering alcoholic.
Did any of you guys ever have in high school or college a debate club? Anybody ever on a debate club?
We didn't have that.
We didn't have that either.
I did. It was the one club that said I wasn't geeky enough to join.
Well, I'm glad I didn't, there wasn't one around because I don't talk fast enough to be in a debate club. What about arguing? How many of you have ever been in an argument?
Oh, yes.
How many of you just sort of enjoy arguments?
No.
Do you know people that enjoy arguments?
Yes.
So there's arguing, good-natured arguing, and then there's real serious arguing, right?
Right.
What you guys may or may not know is that I have degrees in human communications and psychology from Abilene Christian, which means I'm qualified to talk to crazy people. So hello.
Hello.
One of the things that they taught us in the communication side of that it's always stuck with me, is how unproductive arguing is. And one of the reasons, the reason that arguing is unproductive, now it's not necessarily unproductive to talk to people who have a different view than you do, as long as you can keep the heat down, as long as you can keep the emotion down. Mm-hmm. But once the heat gets in there, and once the emotions start going up, here's what happens. The dynamic changes. So you can have a conversation or a discussion with someone that you have that you disagree about, but the second it becomes emotional, And so, let's think in terms of relationships like husband, wives, girlfriend, boyfriends, whatever, brothers, sisters, family members. When things go from a conversation to an argument, and what both sides are trying to do is to present their side as strongly and as convincingly as possible, but there's emotion involved, then what actually happens, and you're probably way ahead of me. What actually happens is that the more emotional it gets, there's a point at which you switch from listening with an ear to possibly being convinced. You switch to thinking about what you're going to say next to prove your point. And there's a point at which in arguing where if you let it go on long enough, it's actually counterproductive, because all the two people, if there are two people arguing, all the two people are doing is becoming, as they talk, they're becoming more convinced that their point of view is right. And so that's why arguing isn't very good. Debate is different than arguing. And how is debate different than arguing?
Because you consider each other's point of view. You listen to, you take the time to listen to the other person's point of view, and then you decide whether or not you agree with it, or you've got something that you can use to argue against it. So it's not quite so heated. It's you talk and then I talk, and we both consider each other's point of view.
Okay.
Is that fair?
That is certainly, but there's something there. There's something involved in a debate that very rarely is involved in an argument.
Well, wouldn't a debate be kind of planned out?
Okay,
Like you have a strategy. You have a strategy.
And my mother said time limits, so you're saying there are actual rules that are involved.
Right.
Okay, and
Free for all, which is what an argument is, just a free for all.
that's right.
Unless you're talking about the presidential debates, and then they sometimes are free for alls and don't follow the rules.
Well, there you go. That's what the mute button's for.
Respect.
So the key to a sharing of differing views, I think, see if you agree with this, is something called a moderator.
Yes.
And in relationships, a moderator is called a therapist or a counselor. In debates, a moderator is called a moderator. In arguments, it's a free-for-all. It's like you say. And what we're looking at in Habakkuk is, I don't know if I would call it an argument, although it does have many characteristics that would lend itself to be called an argument, because you've got one of the guys who is absolutely emotionally invested. Now, God certainly is invested with love, but also with justice, which is one of our struggles of understanding God, a God of justice, a God of love. And then there's Habakkuk. So keep that in mind as we work our way through that. We've got two completely different goals. Habakkuk has one goal, and God has a different goal. Habakkuk's goal is to convince God of something. God's goal is to recommunicate, to reinforce messages that have already been delivered. So you're going to recognize this from previous classes, but we're going to approach it just a little bit different. There are places for you to write a little note down, and I'm going to be filling in some blanks as we go. And so let's go ahead and move on down the road a little bit. Ron?
Okay. God gave Habakkuk a burden in the form of a vision. Habakkuk was horrified by what he saw. He started talking. At first, he sounded like this. You are unresponsive and you're not paying attention. Why? I'm horribly offended and you're allowing it. Why? I'm frightened and you are doing nothing. Why? Law and order has disappeared. Justice is corrupted. Why? 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 Why?
Keep going.
The difficult truth about why questions, you most definitely blank.
You most definitely, so when things are going rough, when we're going through difficult times, most of us want to ask why questions, and most of us do. It is definitely okay to ask why questions. It's all right to do that. But the second blank is, but rarely, if you get an answer, most of the time you don't get an answer. But if you get an answer, it won't make you feel any better. It won't make the consequences any less serious, or the future, the near future, any less dire. And if you'll, well, let's go on down and keep working through the rest of this, because we're going to refer back to what we just said. But when we're struggling, why questions? Fine, ask them all you'd like, with the wise understanding that even if you got the answer, it probably wouldn't make you feel any better. Let's keep going.
Okay. God responds, or begins to respond. Habakkuk 1:5-11. Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed, for I'm going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. An unsettling beginning.
There's a phrase here that I wanted to draw our attention to that we haven't yet drawn any attention to, and that's the way that God begins. And what does he say? So Habakkuk has asked him several why questions, and God, rather than going the way we have it organized here, rather than going down and answering all four questions, he really doesn't do that. He tells him, he gives him a rather ominous piece of advice. He says, watch the what? What does it say?
The nations.
What does that mean? If we understood exactly what Habakkuk meant, what Habakkuk understood, so Habakkuk has laid his heart out there, and his concerns and his fear and his anxiety and all of that. He's laid all of that out there, and he's even blamed God. You're not paying attention. And God, rather than being defensive, because that's not his goal, right? His goal is not to defend himself. His goal is to reinforce the message that he's trying to communicate to Habakkuk, and then he wants Habakkuk to communicate to Judah, or to what's left of Israel. So, Ron, let's talk about this for just a second. God starts by saying, watch the nations. What's God talking about? And I'm springing this on Ron, by the way. We haven't talked about it.
So my thought is Habakkuk is focused on the injustice and the problems with Israel. And God's saying, quit staring at your navel, look at the bigger world. But that's my initial response, and you're catching me totally off guard. So
totally off guard. But you're exactly right. And there's more than just that going on. Hold on. Sorry, my dog's having a fit about something. Ronnie, it's your washing machine. It's my dog. So remember, Israel, when they crossed the Jordan River, I want to take you all the way back. When they crossed the Jordan River into the land of Canaan, they were invading an already inhabited country, right?
correct.
There were lots of nations already there. So now think about this for a minute. Habakkuk has come to God and said, I have questions for you, God. I want you to deal with this. I want you to answer to this. I want you to explain this. I want you to stop this or start this. And God says the answer to all of your concerns at this late stage in the game, Habakkuk, are not coming from me. They're coming from your enemies. Watch the nations. And God doesn't say I until he says, watch the nations. You're not going to believe what I'm going to do using them. There's nothing good about this. At this stage of the game, there are no good relationships between what's left of Israel and the surrounding nations. Nothing good exists. And so God is refocusing and saying, you want me to fix it? I'm going to use them to fix it. And this is not good news. All right, let's keep moving.
I am raising up the Babylons, that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. They are a law to themselves and promote their own honor. A devastating continuation.
So, we've looked at other prayers in this series so far. We looked at the prayer of Jesus in the garden. We looked at the prayer of the martyrs underneath the altar. We looked at Paul's prayer. We've looked at other prayers where people have been praying for divine deliverance. And in each case, the answer wasn't yes, of course, here's your deliverance. The answer was, I'm doing something. God says, I have a role that I need you to play. I have a job I need you to do. Or to those martyred underneath the temple that we read from Revelation 6, it's not over. This martyrdom is not over yet. This persecution is not over yet. Everyone who is supposed to die hasn't died. These are not, you wouldn't think in terms of these being positive or answers to prayer, would you?
Right.
So Habakkuk is in the same situation. And notice the way that God multiplies things. He starts by saying, look around, you looking for answers, Habakkuk? Look at the nations. Well, there's nothing good there. And then God says, well, let me be more specific. Look at Babylon. Look at the Babylonians. And let me remind you what kind of people they are. Ron, do you mind reading that description one more time?
That ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. They are a law to themselves and promote their own honor.
Now that's a horrible description of a group of people. That let's talk about your neighbors across the street, God says. But what must just shake Habakkuk to the core is what he says first, before he goes on to describe something that Habakkuk doesn't need to. Habakkuk doesn't need God to describe the Babylonians to him, does he? Habakkuk knows about the Babylonians and who they are. But look at what God says. First he says, Habakkuk, look to the nations for the answers to your problems. And I am going to address your problems, but not in any way that you would ever think that I'm going to. And as the Babylonians ride down on you, know that I sent them. Now, if Habakkuk wasn't burdened before the beginning of this conversation, this divine debate, he certainly is now. let's continue on. And if anybody has a comment, feel free to jump in, or a question, feel free to jump in. You're familiar with this, but I'm wanting you to see this give and take and the brilliance of, and the desperation of Habakkuk and the brilliance of God as he answers him.
Their horses are swifter than leopards, fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallops headlong. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like an eagle swooping to devour. They all come intent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. It's as if God is saying,
So I'll open that up to you. It's almost like God is saying what to them? What's God saying? They're more prepared than you are.
Right.
They're more ruthless than you are. They have better weapons of war than you do. They have a totally different worldview and understanding of the worth of human life than you do. It's almost as if God is saying what to Judah?
I'm sending the worst.
I'm sending the worst. There's no question. So am I putting words in God's mouth when I say it's as if God is saying, you might as well not even defend yourself.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Don't fight back, Habakkuk. If there's one positive note that you can take to your leaders, to your king, to your military leaders, to your people, tell them, when this happens, don't fight back. Now, the reason that I'm going to suggest this is because there was a tradition in the ancient world. It was true in the days of the Assyrians, in the days of the Babylonians. It was true in the conquest of Alexander the Great. It was true. Well, it was when Rome came through, and they were, Rome didn't lay waste unless you fought back. And one of the reasons that Jerusalem wasn't destroyed by the Roman Empire a little bit before the time that Jesus was born is because when Rome came through, they gave them a chance. They sent word ahead, and they said, send out a delegation. We are coming to your city. We are coming to your nation. Now, if you won't fight back, and if you'll agree to pay taxes and to follow our laws, we'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
We won't change your religion, except that you can't offer human sacrifices. We won't change your political. We'll let you go ahead with your leadership, the way you have it set up with your society. We really aren't going to change your lives very much, except we're going to make you pay financially. Now, how many of you, we've talked about this in the past. You remember that Babylon had already warned in the previous 10 years, had already warned Judah that if they didn't fall into line, there were going to be serious consequences. And Judah had ignored them. And so when they, in 622, when they finally destroyed Jerusalem, it actually started 2 years earlier, folks. 2 years earlier, they surrounded Jerusalem. They cut Jerusalem off. For 2 years, Jerusalem fought. For 2 years, women and children died in the streets of hunger and disease. For 2 years. I mean, how long have we been fighting this COVID thing?
Yeah.
A decade.
Does that put it in perspective for you a little bit? what are we into 8 months now? And you've seen the carnage that it's done to our financial system, and to individual people, not just systems, but people, families. This went on for 2 years. If they had paid attention to what God, the descriptors that God was using of the Babylonians, and the fact that he was behind it, I am sending them. If they'd paid attention, they wouldn't have fought back. And maybe, just maybe, and this is a huge maybe, I realize that, but I want to remind you that it was at the end of this final act of destruction from Babylon that the city of Israel was razed to the ground, the temple gone, the Ark of the Covenant, which was the act, Ron was talking about the sacrament of assembly Sunday morning in class. I hope you were there for that. That was a beautiful class, a wonderful class. That God has promised in situations like, in things, sacraments like baptism, in sacraments like Lord's Supper, in sacraments like assembly, God has promised that if you do things the way I ask you to do them, if you will involve yourself in the things that I've asked you to involve yourself in, I will be there and be with you. And that was the Ark of the Covenant. God had said, build it this way, and once a year I will come and rest upon it. My presence will dwell with you in that moment, in that Holy of Holies. You ever wonder if, and I quite frankly hadn't much until I got into this Habakkuk study, that if they had really listened to everything that God is saying about who's coming and who's sending them, he's sending them, and what they and the kind of people that they are and their capabilities, that maybe there's a message in there that says, just don't fight back. And if they hadn't, maybe there would still be a temple. Maybe there wouldn't be a mosque on the Temple Mount today. I'm just, now I know that mosque is there because the Romans destroyed Israel, but in 70. But who knows what, you change one thing, who knows what else you change? But of course, they didn't hear that message. They didn't get that message. Ron, you want to continue on or make any comments, or?
No, let's roll.
Okay.
And what if they had? You've
What if
already
they
kind of addressed that.
Right.
They mock kings and scoff at rulers. They laugh at all fortified cities. By building up earthen ramps, they capture them. Then they sweep past like the wind and go on. Guilty people whose own strength is their God. Then God acknowledges the character of the Babylonians. They are.
So God has said, look around at the nations. He said, let me remind you of who they are. He said, and the Babylonians, oh, by the way, let me remind you of who they are. Oh, and by the way, let me tell you what they can do in battle. And then he says, and let me tell you what kind of folks they are. Read that one more. Read that description one more time. What are these people you'd want to have lunch with?
They mock kings and scoff at rulers. They laugh at all fortified cities. By building earthen ramps, they capture them. Then they sweep past like the wind and go on. Guilty people whose own strength is their God.
They are proud people. They are arrogant people. They don't care about other people besides themselves. There's no regret. When the wind comes through, that terrible, terrible storm, that I couldn't imagine this last storm that just hit Nicaragua. Could you?
Oh, man.
155-mile-an-hour winds over a place that had just had Nicaragua is gone. I mean, it's wiped. As far as anything any buildings left or any infrastructure, water, electricity. It's gone, folks.
Yeah.
And that wind, that hurricane that moved through, and now it's exiting. Does it have a conscience? Is it sad about what it's done? No. No. You may say, Dan, those are stupid questions. Well, God's comparing the Babylonians to them, to wind. As much as the wind cares about the building it just blew over, that's how much the Babylonians care about what they're going to do to you.
Amen.
So, and then there's that last phrase. Read those last couple of lines, Ron, one more time.
Put it back up. They sweep past like the wind and go on, guilty people whose own strength is their God.
So God doesn't say for a moment that, hey, there's certain things about these people that are pretty good folks, does he?
No.
Based on what Habakkuk knew about God, what we know about God, the kind of people, the kind of ways that God wants his people to live, the kind of people he wants his people to be, God isn't saying, oh, by the way, there's a couple of things you can learn from these Babylonians. So there's a couple of things, maybe you ought to think about being like them a little bit. He doesn't say that, does he? He says, oh, by the way, before you start up with the next thing that you're going to say, I know they're guilty. They're absolutely guilty. In a sense, they're unredeemable at that stage of the game. And I know that they don't reckon God. This is God saying, and I know that they don't see me as God. They see themselves and their conquests and their abilities and their possessions. Those are their gods. Knowing all of that, Habakkuk, knowing all of that, they're coming, and I'm sending. What's next?
If Habakkuk was already horrified, how does he feel now?
That's sort of a dumb question, huh? But remember now, Habakkuk, what's his goal here, folks?
Change God's mind.
Trying to change God, trying to figure out. So he's hearing all of this. Now imagine hearing all of this with your goal being to stop it somehow.
Right. To try to change his mind.
How's he feeling so far? Now, if it were me or if it were you, what would you do after this little exchange? It's not little, this exchange. You start out with all your why stuff about God, to God, about himself and how he's been handling things and how you don't approve. And then God starts talking. Look at the nations. Oh yeah, I know what's going on. You're talking to me as if I don't know what's going on, Habakkuk. I know. In fact, I have a plan. Would you like for me to share it with you? This is what it's going to look like. And this is who the bad actors are going to be. And I don't pretend for a minute to defend their character or their moral superiority, because they don't have it. What would you do? Ron, what would you do? You had been.
Well, this is striking me like those conversations you have with the kids where they're protesting some light punishment that you're giving them for something they did, and they throw a fit, and then you just go, okay, well, how about we just take your cell phone away for a month? How about and then you start with the overwhelming devastation on top of them. And then pretty soon they start going, okay, I'll cooperate. That's how I feel right now.
Yeah. And
if
what
I'm
would you
Habakkuk.
do? Anybody else? If you were Habakkuk?
Start packing.
Seems to be responding of, wait a minute, God, this is not what you are.
Oh, well,
You are this way. You
see,
are
you're braver than me. Who said that? Who was that?
That's Thomas.
Thomas. Thomas, you're braver than me, because you know what I would do, folks? I would turn around and walk away. And somebody said it. I don't know who said it. Somebody said I could start packing.
Carol Powell said that.
Carol, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Get out of Dodge.
Let's get our donkeys and load them up.
Yep, and get out of town.
And get out of town.
Amen. That's scary. It's frightening as can be. I mean, this description he's giving here that's terrifying. You know, I mean, think about it. You're this little bitty town or whatever, and this next nation over is gonna. I mean, they're with this kind of description.
And Ron, you were talking about, this is way beyond taking the cell phone away at this point, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that
That's pretty bad.
most teenagers would view that as the
Yep.
worst punishment in the world.
Yeah.
Until they found out there was something worse.
Jesse would rather I beat her with a club.
So where I want us to we're just about done. Nearly. What time is it, Ron? How are we doing?
7:40.
Okay, we got time to do what I want to do then. So we're just about done. So here's what I want you guys.
Do you want to get into verse
see.
12?
Go ahead.
Do you want to get into verse 12? Is that what you're saying? I'm asking.
What I want to point out, and yes, I want to get into verse 12. But what I want to point out is, I would at this point say, okay, all right, God, all right, I'm out of here. I'm not going to tell them any. They're not going to listen. We've been talking to them. You and I, we've been talking to them for a long time. I'm out of here. Habakkuk doesn't do that. Go ahead now, Ron, with what's coming.
So Habakkuk seems to pause his protest. When he starts talking again, he sounds very different. 12a. Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die. Habakkuk's tone seems to have shifted to be more
Yeah,
Placating.
yeah.
Not only did Habakkuk not leave, which Chicken Little here would have.
Yeah.
Jonah tried leaving and it didn't help him any.
That's right. He started and wound up smelling like fish, didn't he? But
Yeah, he did.
so he stops in this divine debate and he says, okay, maybe I've been approaching God wrong. Let me think about this for a minute. Oh,
Yeah.
And then, well, Lord, you were around before there wasn't anything, and you're going to be around after everything's over. You'll never die. So it's if he starts with could we use the word conciliatory? Is that a good word?
sure.
But he doesn't stick with it very long. Let's keep
No,
going.
he doesn't.
Okay. You, Lord, have appointed them to execute judgment. You, my rock, have ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous?
Isn't that interesting?
The next line is, where is Habakkuk going with this line of reasoning?
Yeah. Where y'all think he's going now? Oh God, you don't. As if God needs to be reminded who he is. Ha ha, right?
Right.
Oh God, you're from everlasting to everlasting. You'll never die. You're the wisest. You're the greatest. Now, this is not, here's something that, try to get your minds around this, folks. This is scary stuff. This is not authentic praise. This is manipulative
Yeah.
praise. This is not a fall on your face and worship the majesty of God because God is majestic. This is, I'm still got to figure out how to win this debate, this argument, to get my way. Oh God, you wouldn't want to, hey, we got some sayings down where I come from here in Judah. God, lay down with fleas, or dogs get up with fleas, right?
Okay.
One apple can spoil the whole batch, right? You don't want to you don't want to involve yourself with these kinds of people. Really. You're better than that. Can y'all hear this?
Yeah.
And what he's about to do, this is where it's going to go off the rails, and this is where we're going to leave it. But what he's about to do, folks, what Habakkuk is about to do is to say, and I'm going to just give it away. All right, spoiler alert, we won't be together for another 2 weeks. You'll forget anyway, okay? What Habakkuk is about to do is this. God, you wouldn't use bad people to punish us good people, would you?
Anybody else ever do that in the Bible? Remember when Abraham, when he stood in front of him, when he talked to the Lord about trashing out Sodom and Gomorrah. If there's 10 good people, would you trash the whole city and kill them all? He's trying to use God's goodness against God's will. I guess I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but he's trying to save himself by placating on God's goodness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I was saying, does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh, yes. I want to remind everybody of something, and I know I don't need to remind you guys of this. Y'all are and I appreciate your patience with us going through this one more time the way that we have tonight, a little bit differently than we have in the past. So I want to turn your attention. I want us all to recognize and remind that God hadn't just turned bad all of a sudden. He hadn't turned mean. He didn't have a bad day. He's not revealing a part of his character that he hasn't revealed before. He's been absolutely honest since creation. And that's where I want us to go to finish up tonight. Ron, can you get us to Genesis chapter 3?
Yes.
Verse 14. Folks, you're going to recognize this real quick.
Give me a 30 seconds.
That's fine. While you're working.
Not 30 seconds. Genesis 3:13?
14, but before you read it, here's what has just happened. And you folks, you already know this. They've eaten of the fruit. The serpent has gotten them to eat of the fruit, Adam and Eve. And as they have eaten, and as the sweetness of that fruit fills their mouth, the horror of sin and evil makes itself known to them. Mm-hmm. And something called shame, they experience it for the first time. They realize that they don't have any clothes on. never bothered them before. But now that they've chosen their will over God's, now that they've chosen not to depend on him for what was good and what was evil, but to try to take into themselves the knowledge of that thing, those things, good and evil, and then go about making their own decisions about them and managing their own lives without his help. Now they know they don't have any clothes on. And God comes walking through the garden as he does in the evening to walk with them and talk with them about their day. God knows what's happened. Where are you? We're over here. What are you doing over there? Well, we're embarrassed. We're ashamed. What are you ashamed about? Well, have you noticed we're naked? Who told you you were naked? Oh, you ate that fruit, didn't you? Well, you know, that woman that you gave me.
That you put here with me.
And, oh, the woman, well, this serpent that you obviously you knew the serpent was in the garden, God. And God said, long before he ever spoke to Habakkuk about the Babylonians, he said, well, you want to be me? I'm all about bringing order out of chaos. That's what I'm about. Can you do that? Let's see. Because there are some consequences. You know, and people talk about this, is that God at this point cursed these people. He didn't curse them. He just let what was going to happen happen. And starting in verse 14, he starts to read. He starts to tell them, we're going to read. He starts to tell them about their Babylonians that are about to ride down on them.
Mm-hmm.
And what does he say, Ron, starting in verse 14?
The Lord said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all the cattle and all the living creatures of the field. On your belly you will crawl, and dust you will eat all the days of your life. And I will put hostility between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. Her offspring will attack your head, and you will attack her offspring's heel. Go on.
Well, we're going to read just a little bit more. But what I want you to see here, folks, is that from the very beginning, isn't it interesting that almost anything that we talk about, whatever subject comes up in our Bible study, you can probably go back to the first 3 chapters of the Bible and find the roots of it.
Amen.
What God is saying to Habakkuk is, who do you think's been holding those Babylonians back? The way this is going to feel to you is that I'm sending them on you. Habakkuk, I've been holding them back. Adam and Eve.
I've been holding it back.
Who do you think has caused the flourishing had created this paradise that you're living in? Who do you think has kept it alive, has kept it perfect? And now you want to do that. And this is what it's going to look like. It's going to destroy relationships. And then the next couple of verses, I guess, and this is not a very encouraging place to leave it, but this is where I want us to leave it tonight, sort of. Let's keep reading in Genesis.
To the woman he said, I will greatly increase your labor pains. With pain you will give birth to children. You will want to control your husband, but he will dominate you. But to Adam, he said, because you obeyed your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. The ground is cursed because of you, and painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life.
Now you notice there in the narrative that the way that it's translated from the original, the Hebrew into English, it leaves us with some misconceptions. And those misconceptions are that God is cursing the serpent, that God is cursing the woman. That's an unfortunate misconception that's left by what happens in translation. But notice what he says when he says to Adam, this is a little bit better translation. He doesn't say, I am cursing you, Adam. What does he say? Once again, read that one more time.
The ground is cursed because of you.
The ground is cursed because of you. Because of you. You broke the world. The relationship between the serpent and the humans and his position on the earth is ruined. I didn't do it. You did it. The pain that you're going to have in childbirth, that's not on me. That's on you. I've been holding that back. I didn't intend that. You opened the door to it. And to Habakkuk, he's saying, I know I selected you. I selected Abraham. I made promises. I selected David. I made promises. And for a while, you know what? For a while, it's going to feel like I'm not keeping those. But I will keep those. And the fact that I'm going to allow these things to happen will make the sweet promises that I'm going to keep all that more significant to you. Because, see, God doesn't need time for perspective. He doesn't need to live for 40 or 50 years and then look back to see himself and how he's been working, does he? But I do. You do. And apparently Israel does. So, and the reason that I wanted to show you and remind you of Genesis 3 is to see that God hadn't changed. God's not coming out of the box with something a characteristic that he's never had before. They've just become so caught up in what they want, in what they think is important, in the way they think they should live. And they've set aside everything, or much of what he called them to do. And the natural consequence is Babylon. And so, as Ron would say, where do we land this plane? Well, once again, you've heard me say it before, and I say it a lot when I teach from the Old Testament or when I read the Old Testament. Aren't you glad we're on this side of the cross? Stanley Shipp used to have a thing that he said, I sure am glad I wasn't around when the Bible got wrote. Because, and he was specifically at times talking about the Old Testament, New Testament too, obviously. Because our stories would be in there. But because of the work of Christ, because of the grace of God delivered through faith in Jesus, the blood of his son purifies us. 1 John chapter 1. We're going to continue to dig around in this prophecy, and we're going to watch Habakkuk eventually turn, but he's gonna show, next time we get together, he's going to show how unself-aware he and Israel have become, which is, it's important for us to see that so we don't let that happen to ourselves or to each other. So woohoo, have a party, right?
I'm going to go dance in the church parking lot.
I guess I'll lead us in a prayer unless anybody has any questions or comments.
Well, we definitely want Azalee to read us out because she's going to have the scripture for us.
Okay.
Oh, he's always been saying the prayer. So I just say one. I just read it. Psalms.
Azalee, if you want to say a prayer, that's fine.
Well, you can say a prayer. I didn't get anything prayed. I was going to let you pray tonight.
Okay. Was Azalee going to read something?
She's going to read us a psalm.
Okay, I'll have to say one. I didn't write one down. I left the Lord. He heard my voice. He heard my cry for mercy. Because he turned his ear toward me, I called upon him as long as I lived. The cords of death entangled me. Angels gave us upon me. I was overcome with trouble and sorrow, and I called on him. How gracious is the Lord of the land, Lord.
Amen. Amen.
Okay.
Y'all don't have to run off if you want to chat or ask a question or whatever. It's 8:01. You're welcome to leave, check out if you wish, but you're also welcome to stick around.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.